I love a hangout game. Games like Monster Hunter or Destiny, where you get to just like hang out in a cool space, show off all of the armor and equipment you've unlocked, go do the same thing over and over again, but just like chat with your friends. And I think most importantly, when you're fighting, a tough monster, or you're in a raid or a strike or something, every once in a while, group chat silences. Everybody needs to lock in. You have those moments of deep, intense pressure. It's the moments where you go from complaining about a weird text you got earlier that day to, oh my God, if we don't focus up, all of this time will have been wasted. That's fun. Nintendo finally has a great hangout game in Splatoon Raiders. It's a game where you can jump into a level with your friends, fight a bunch of salmon, get some better loot than you had before, and then do it all again, baby. And this continues a long-standing trend of Nintendo entering genres late and having their own really unique, interesting take on them. Games like Luigi's Mansion being Nintendo's take on things like Resident Evil or Silent Hill. Pikmin being Nintendo's bizarre take on a real-time strategy game. Super Smash Bros. At this point feels like an iconic staple of the fighting game genre, but when it was released, it was a pretty unique take on the fighting game genre. And I think the most important example here is Splatoon itself. Splatoon 1, 2, and 3 are Nintendo's unique take on the PvP shooter genre. In a world of games like Overwatch and Battlefield and Destiny, Nintendo finally had their own entrant into this space, and one that like any age group could get into. A lot of that all ages appeal came from the fact that you are not explicitly going out to fight other players in Splatoon. You're just trying to cover the ground in as much of your own colored ink as possible, but of course you can defeat other players in the process. That turf war idea rules, but the thing that rules even harder is being able to take all the rewards you get from playing turf war and using them to buy new accessories and articles of clothing and customizing those things to make a representation of yourself in the Splatoon universe. Fashion and style are so important to the identity of Splatoon as a franchise, and as much fun as Turf War is just to play mechanically, I think the reason people continue grinding is because they want the perfect outfit to show off to everybody else. Interestingly enough, within Splatoon 2 and 3 was a mode that was introduced called Salmon Run, which was a PvE mode that existed purely, and in the developer's own words, as a way of making sure that people who were playing their Nintendo Switch out and about could have smaller, more focused and fun matches that they could play with their friends if they all had a Nintendo Switch with them. That idea to me feels so 3DS and DS coded, like that era of Nintendo specifically, where they assume that you're going to bring your Nintendo Switch with you to a mall so you can all play Splatoon Salmon Run together. I don't know if anyone's ever doing that. It's very similar to that first trailer for the Nintendo Switch where people play Mario Kart on the rooftop. Like, that's not a thing that happens very often, but it does happen sometimes, and maybe it did happen with Salmon Run. Personally, I'm so happy Salmon Run exists. It's my favorite part of Splatoon 2 and 3. I'm so glad it's in there, and I'm even more stoked that Splatoon Raiders is basically just Salmon Run turned into an entire video game all its own. In Splatoon Raiders, you play as the mechanic. You're either an Inkling or an Octoling who's helping out Deep Cut, which is Shiver, Fry, and Big Man, as they go try to basically Indiana Jones their way into salmonid territory. One horrible crash later, and everybody is stranded on a floating base called the Hideout, where they set out and continue to try to find salmonid treasure so they can make enough money before they return home. What the game actually is, like the core loop of the game, is you pick a level, you jump into that level, and you fight off waves of salmonid as they show up and try to prevent you from getting their treasure. There are a bunch of different kinds of levels, but every single level ends the same way, which is that you will get a bunch of like weapons and loot and gear and things like that that you can use to unlock even more stuff to customize yourself and make yourself more powerful when you go into the next level. That loop is very similar to the looter shooter. It's very much like a Destiny or like a Diablo or a Monster Hunter. What do you call a looter shooter when it has swords in it? A smash and grab? A slash and grab? Is it a slash and grab? Either way, Splatoon Raiders is a looter shooter. And because of that, it enters the hallowed halls of things like the Luigi's Mansions and the Pikmin of the world, where Nintendo is once again taking this established genre, sitting back and saying, how do we put our own very unique spin on this? And I think Splatoon Raiders is absolutely brilliant at doing this. I think one of the weirdest parts about Splatoon Raiders, though, is that in its lead up, it was marketed pretty heavily as a single player experience. In Nintendo's own Ask a Developer series on their blog, which you should read, it's really fascinating. You should read Ask a Developer if you haven't, you have any interest in like how Nintendo functions as a company. But anyway, in the Splatoon Raiders edition of the Ask a Developer, producer Saita Inoue was asked, "Could you briefly explain what kind of game Splatoon Raiders is?" And he responded, "Splatoon is a series in which mysterious squids who can transform into humanoid form battle to claim turf using ink. Splatoon Raiders is a spin-off title in that series. While preserving the Splatoon series' fundamental controls, the game is designed as a more focused, single-player experience rather than a competitive one." I find that framing to be strange. The idea of Splatoon Raiders as a single-player game showed up a lot in the marketing cycle leading up to the release. And having played so much of this game, it is playable solo, is I think as kind as I can be about that. It doesn't mean that you should play it solo. And just like the games it's pulling from, like a Monster Hunter or like a Destiny, while it is possible to experience the entire thing by yourself, it is so much better with friends. As a big fan of Monster Hunter, I think that was the big turning point for Monster Hunter as a franchise as well. Once you start getting the PSP entries in particular, which allow for online play with other people, you have this back and forth between I could do this by myself or I could jump online, find a group of people, and take down this monster, and it's going to be significantly more fun because everybody's bringing their own unique weapons and loadouts with them. Splatoon Raiders is the same way because you're gearing yourself up with all of these different interesting loadouts. You have different tanks which have different abilities. And, you know, one player could have a turret and one player could have like a super jump in the air and the other one could have a big axe that they swing around. And that's going to be 3 very unique play styles. But when you blend them all together in the level in Splatoon Raiders, it's going to allow you greater flexibility in achieving the goals that you're trying to achieve. Or everybody could just use the tactical tank and then everybody has a turret firing at the same time. Either way, you're mixing and matching a bunch of different abilities and gear, and that's fun. That's part of the fun of it. The single player experience in Splatoon Raiders is basically you jump into a level and you either win or you lose, and if you lose, you have to go back to other levels you've already completed and then just do them over and over and over again and grind to hopefully get better loot and level up, etc. And that's just not as fun as utilizing the multiplayer experience that is here. When you're looking at the map of all the available levels, you could just press the minus button at any time, and that will just load you into matchmaking, where you will just help out somebody who needs help with a specific level. And likewise, if you are having difficulty with a specific level, or you're jumping into a spicy version of a level you've already completed, which is just like a more difficult version of a level with better rewards, you could press the help button yourself, and then again, you'll launch into matchmaking and random people will just come and help you. Likewise, if you're playing with a group of your friends, you can jump into levels that your friends haven't completed yet, so you can help them through the campaign. That experience specifically, like jumping into the game with your friends and just hanging out in like a Discord chat or in Nintendo Switch 2 game chat, if you're one of the people using that, which I still haven't used at all. You jump into Splatoon Raiders with your friends, you hop into a Discord chat or call your friend on the phone or whatever, and then you just chat about whatever, and you just continue running through levels. And the game mechanically is so much fun. You will just rip through levels without even thinking about it. Every once in a while, you'll be like, oh, cool, I got a good weapon. And then you move on and do it all over again. All of that ratchets up when you go into levels that are too difficult, and then you end up losing, and then you have that moment where everybody's like, okay, no more talking about our hopes and dreams. We need to focus. What is everybody's loadout? How are we going to beat this boss? So I think as a hangout game, as a looter shooter, Splatoon Raiders is a slam dunk. I could play it forever. I probably will play it forever. I love it to death. I like it a lot more than the mainline Splatoon franchise, if I'm being totally honest. Like, taking my favorite bit of Splatoon and turning it into its own game, fantastic. Great for me in particular. But it does have me asking more questions about why it was promoted so heavily as a single-player game. And I think the idea is less so that it is a solo single-player experience, like you are just playing by yourself with no help, not helping anybody else, and more so that the loop that I've actually been doing more often than not, which is just jumping into the help mode and helping other people with missions and vice versa, does mean that I am technically playing by myself, right? Like, I'm sitting in my office, I'm playing Splatoon Raiders, I'm not on the phone with anybody, I'm not in Discord chat, I'm just playing with randoms over and over again with chat off. And I guess that is a single player experience, right? I think at the end of the day, like, they weren't wrong. I think they just phrased it the wrong way. It may seem like a small gripe, but it's kind of an important one because I think a lot of people bought this game assuming that it was going to be an actually single-player Splatoon game, and that's not really the case. Again, it technically is, but is it? While we're talking about gripes, I already mentioned, I think fashion is like part and parcel with Splatoon as a franchise. I don't love the fashion choices in this game. And I think in particular, the idea that you unlock entire outfits based on certain achievements. So like, oh, you've upgraded 5 weapons, or you defeated this boss or whatever. Here's, you know, this new set of overalls that's shiny, is not as enticing to me as here are some cool sunglasses, here's a sick bandana, etc., etc. I think that's always going to be more interesting to me. I would love a sequel to Splatoon Raiders that goes even harder in the paint on fashion. I want the full Splatoon fashion experience in Splatoon Raiders. It's like the one thing that's missing to me. Like literally the one thing I think is missing. And I think doubling down on the fashion in Raiders would actually aid the hangout game aspect of it as well, right? Think about games like Destiny or Monster Hunter or even MMOs, you know, games like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV. They all kind of just become fashion simulators at a certain point. At a certain point, you're all hanging out in shared spaces just showing off the cool armor you've unlocked. And I feel like that's so important to Splatoon, and it's really missing here. The most you get it really is in the treasure screen, like when you finish a level and it says like treasure, and then you see everybody who played in the level together. But you only for like 3 seconds can see people's outfits, and honestly, a lot of them look the same. They're pretty underwhelming. If there was going to be a sequel to Splatoon Raiders, and I hope there is, I would hope for 2 things in particular. One of them is increased focus on fashion, allow me to get specific articles of clothing and mix and match them. And number 2 is a true shared hangout space. I should be able to invite my friends into my hideout. We shouldn't all have our own separate hideouts. We should be in one shared space when we're playing online together. I think those 2 things would go a really long way and actually take Splatoon Raiders to a totally different level. I think that would be huge. And I guess that's the bigger question about what happens like when Splatoon 4 comes out. Does it even have Salmon Run in it? Or is Splatoon Raiders just the replacement for Salmon Run, and Splatoon as a mainline franchise just goes all in on PvP, and Splatoon Raiders is just this all new PvE direction for the franchise? I think that's an interesting split, and I don't hate it. It does make me question if I would get Splatoon 4 or if I would just wait for a sequel to Splatoon Raiders or maybe DLC or added stuff to Splatoon Raiders. But I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I think splitting the fan base into pieces is like maybe not a bad idea. It's a big swing, don't get me wrong. It's a big idea for Nintendo to be like, hey, we're gonna take this fan base, cleave it in half, and, you know, let people have the thing that they want the most. But if it makes a game as good as Splatoon Raiders, then I'm not complaining, dude. But I think if you're a person who's been on the fence about picking up Splatoon Raiders, first of all, do it. I think it's good. I can't imagine many people who would dislike it unless you really hate Splatoon. Like if you have a Nintendo Switch 2 and you hate Splatoon, you don't think Splatoon is fun at all, then like, yeah, don't get it. But I think most people would probably like it, especially if you can convince some of your friends to get it and play it together. I think the one interesting question in the back of my mind, though, is like, I would question if it was still Splatoon when you remove the PvP side of it, but Splatoon Raiders has proven otherwise. The true question really is like, is it still Splatoon without that sense of fashion and style? And that's a little bit more dicey for me. But, you know, it's a small gripe, I think, in the face of a game that is so fun to play mechanically. I mean, you could just dump hours and hours into it, honestly killing me that I have other games I need to be playing, and I can't just be playing Splatoon Raiders all the time. Thank you so much for watching this one. I really, really appreciate it, especially if you made it all the way to the end of this video. Please like, comment, subscribe. It helps so much. If you want to help even more, you can go to patreon.com/wavelengths and just help support the channel in general. I'll give a little tease. There's a bunch of stuff behind the paywall there on Patreon, but I'm working on developing a card game with a standard deck of playing cards, and I'm going to have the rules up there soon if you want to test out this card game before I reveal it to the world. So that'll be fun. That'll be cool, maybe. Bye-bye.